Welcome back to the podcast. Today is a very special day. Today is our 1-year anniversary podcast. Today we're joined by Jacob and Libby, as well as the main members Noah, Braden Dunlap, and myself, Nick Wiersbicky. Unfortunately, Ashton is not able to join us today, but we're just so very blessed to be together today to talk about God after a long year that God has blessed us with. So I want to open up with this question that's kind of been on my heart to start this conversation of, since we've started this podcast, and it's very unique what God is doing even in this conversation right now and who he's brought here, of like you've have the people that have started it, the atheist is now the biggest Christian I know, to people that maybe started off listening that got the invitation to come on and said yes to that, to someone that has taken a bigger role. How has it changed your life? How has God worked through it? And have there been any struggles with it? Does anyone have anything to say?
Well, could we just start off and kind of reminisce about the first time we recorded the podcast? Because I remember it was a Thursday, right? And we took the PSAT, right? Or something like that.
Yeah.
And so us three and Ashton were like, hey, after school, let's play football, pickleball, basketball, and then we'll record just a little something on our phone and see if we could put that on TikTok. At the time, I don't think we had Instagram. Or no, we wanted to put it on YouTube and TikTok.
Yep. Didn't even want to put it on Instagram. Yeah.
Yeah, we didn't have the Instagram yet. And I remember too, the day before was Marrying This Life, right? And so that was what we were kind of talking about. And Braden over here was just he was asking all the questions, so what happens if, this person does that? And he had all those theological questions. And I don't know how well of a job we did answering them, but I remember at the time I thought it was pretty good.
Yeah.
And just all the stuff Gary, mowing his lawn. We had the Gary counter and stuff like that. And we had the beautiful fall leaves behind us because we recorded it.
Your favorite pose? Your favorite pose?
My favorite pose. Hasn't made an appearance since then.
Business decision.
Yeah. Yeah. No, isn't it crazy? Wait, is today Thursday? Yeah, today's Thursday. So literally it's I think it is a year ago. We don't have school, which is just a blessing. But yeah, it's just crazy where God has taken us, how he's shaped us. And then I even think back to our weightlifting class and talking to you about it and just being and then him coming on literally I think the next day or 2 days after. And then that was when we still had you remember the setup with the box with the camera?
Yeah, I do. I forgot about that.
My goodness. And then were you there when we had good equipment like all this?
Yeah, okay. I was here when you had the whole setup.
Yeah,
I never saw the box.
She never had to deal with the trenches.
We had to make do with what we had.
Oh boy.
But I think the biggest thing is it started just purely off of we just wanted to share the conversations we were already having.
Yes.
So for anyone listening, if you are sitting there and you're I love the conversations I have with my friends, good. That's exactly how this started. And it's, to be honest, the podcast is an excuse to have these conversations. And so that's what I kind of want to move into as this conversation progresses of how has God worked through you, regardless of the podcast, this past year or so. Because I think looking back and reflecting is the most powerful thing we can do because it just shows you the power of God. There's no way to look over the power of God when you reflect on where he's taken you. And I think the podcast is an example of that. So does anyone have anything that really sticks out to them of a defining moment over the past year or just something that they're super thankful for or anything?
I do. So this is very non-coincidental because I was just doing a lot of reflecting on kind of where I was at a year ago. And I felt like I was such a different person. And I was at such a different place. And just, I remember you guys starting the podcast and I was so confused. I was so confused. And I was I didn't know you guys were so in your faith. And I thought that was more interesting because as the podcast started growing, I started meeting more people who were listening to the podcast. I saw them comment on it. I just saw them repost it, and I was like, wow, like, I didn't know those people were so into their faith. Like, it was so interesting. And there are a couple of my friends who, like, would say stuff about the podcast, all good, like, good stuff. And I was like, what? Like, I didn't know that's where your heart was at. Like, it just opened so many doors, I think. And in a part of, like, my testimony, I think when I went on the podcast, that was a big milestone for me, even though it might have seemed like something small, because it was the first time I ever opened up about my faith post-retreat.
Yeah.
And I don't know, it just went headed to there.
I think opening doors is the perfect way to describe it. I mean, after I watched the first podcast, that was like the first real conversation I ever had with Nick, which led me to my first conversations with Noah and Braden. And I mean, Ashton and I had played baseball and stuff before, but, you know, to the further dimension.
Yeah.
And then, you know, we sit next to each other in APAS and then we do again for the next quarter. Definitely not rigged. And, you know, just all those things that built up. And then I'm spending more time with these guys, and I'm realizing that, you know, through that, I'm improving in my faith and my relationship with God, because I had other people to walk the journey with, you know.
Yeah.
You know, be a good analogy for that. You know, already started. Do you guys remember that? So it was us three and Christian Kessler. The first time we went to that early morning Thursday mass at 6:30 a.m. We parked in the student parking lot, and we walked all the way up like the road and like the hill, and it was so cold and windy. And I remember Nick and I were like, "Why are we doing this?"
It was like,
and we just kept going.
to paint the picture, it was like when SpongeBob was, you know,
With the
Krusty
pizza,
Krab.
yes, and the tornado.
Yeah, that's what it felt like.
That's what it felt
but
like.
Like if there were icicles dripping on it, it was so cold.
But at the same time, like, we kept going and we made it to mass, and it was awesome. It was a good mass. And I feel like that's kind of like the way faith is. Like, you have like that group with you, and they just kind of push you to keep going, even when it's like really cold, really early in the morning, and you're just gassed from walking uphill. Like you just they help you keep going. Because I was thinking, like, if you guys weren't there and if it was just me, would I really have like walked up that hill? Maybe, but I know I would have enjoyed it a lot more if like you guys were there.
Yeah.
And I think that's the same way with my faith too.
Yeah. I got two really important points just to bounce off of the whole Christian Kessler thing. Like, he was the crazy guy that said, yeah, let's park in the St. V parking lot and walk up. Like, he was the one that said, like, okay, let's do it this way, right? And the same way, like, Ash and I were the ones that came to you guys and were like, hey, here's this crazy idea. Yep. In the same way, like, and then that bloomed and opened more doors and more doors. And so what I'm speaking to the audience right now and saying is that you guys have that same opportunity. Whether you're being Christian Kessler, where you're saying it's about to be 15 degrees, wind blowing in your face, walking up the hill to church tomorrow, but let's do it because I want to do it together, and I think it'd be a great experience that you can look back a year later and be happy of. Or it's doing something like this where you sit down and have a conversation about God and hope that he uses it to impact others. Or maybe it's other little things in your life. But whatever it is that you feel like God is putting on your heart, go and do it, because you can see the fruit of that in our lives and hopefully throughout this conversation. And the other point that I want to make is, I don't know if you guys remember at the start of the podcast, we'd always be like, how are we going to like find a topic each week? Yeah. And I responded to you guys and said, we'll pray about it. And when I said that, I'm like, maybe that is a little risky. Like, eventually you might...
I remember that used to make me mad because we had like all these topics picked out, and I was like, all right, Nick, we have a list of 10 topics here. And he'd be like, well, I don't know, let's just pray about it and then see what happens.
Yep.
And at the time, I'm like, well, dude, like, we could just pick one and roll with that and then pray about that topic. But in the end, we always like discerned a topic that I think always worked well. Like, there was never a topic we had that I think didn't go well.
And where I'm going to tie this in is with you guys. Think about this. You're known as the Thanksgiving guy.
Oh, Mr. Gratitude.
Gratitude, in which that was your podcast episode. That was the topic that we prayed on and was like, Jacob is going to be here for. And what is Libby? I literally, at our meeting this morning for Kairos, you talked about vulnerability like 5 different times. What was your topic? I was literally sitting there. I'm like, man, that was our topic for the podcast. So how great, like, again, God chills of like, how great is it that what we pray, when I literally was like, hey, let's just pray about the topic and it'll come to us, and like the guests and all that, of like, that is the main theme of the guests that come on. The same way in your guys' life, that's been a theme of your guys' life. And so God knew that we were going to utilize it. So another tip for the audience is just, you know what, just pray about it. Like, you might come to me like Noah did and be like, here's all these different things that we could do. Pray about it. Just let him lead. Please just let him lead, because you've seen what it's done with us, you know? And I think Braden is a great example of that, because when we first started, Braden, I just want to ask you if you can reminisce with me. When you said yes to coming on the first one, like, why?
Well, I'm going to be honest. So I was pretty like at a low point, and I felt like really lonely. So I was like, all right, here's an opportunity to go hang out with some friends. You know, maybe talk about my faith, which didn't exist, but like, just, you know, ask questions. I just sought out an opportunity, and then here I am now. Like, I mean, I've grown in my faith a lot, but there's definitely lots of ups and downs, you know, high streaks for a long time. Then you hit this like medium, and you're like, oh, how do I, you know, keep growing? And when I'm doing all these things, how do I continue to grow on my faith? And then, yeah, here I am now.
So I have a question for you. Did that first episode, did you ever like try to think of a question to like stump us?
That was.
It's funny because like that's like one of my favorite topics is when someone who's like atheistic or they just dislike Christianity in general, is when they try to like ask questions that, you know, disprove Christianity or disprove of faith and stuff like that. And like, I understand that. I mean, I never really went through a phase like that, but like, I totally could have, I feel like. But that's like one of my favorite topics, is when someone who like starts out as an atheist, when they like ask questions and they're like, you know what, I'm set out to prove that Christianity is false, and then they end up converting, because that's happened to probably thousands of people. Like, I've read so many stories about this. One of my favorite authors married a Christian, and he was like, okay, and he was a journalist, so he was like, I'm just gonna gather that information, and then I'm gonna make my claim. And then that dude ends up writing like a book about how Christ is real and like the logic behind it. And I think it's just so cool that like, if you set out to find the truth, well, guess what, you find the truth, and that truth is Christianity.
I really like what Braylon Braden highlighted. What Braden highlighted in what he was talking about, like, yeah, he started in a low point, found the podcast, found this community, and got on a high for faith for a long time, but then it's kind of melted. There's had these, you know, hills and valleys, right? And it's been a journey, right? We can speak as a group for the past year. It has not been easy. It has not been easy. You could see, like, go look at how often we posted over the summer. It was like once a month.
I don't think I showed up during
You
the
didn't
summer.
show up during the summer. Like, it has been it's been a hard journey. But we're still here, and God is still choosing us, and he's still telling us to push through. He's still using it. And so the lesson that really, you know, sticks out to me is like, okay, even with good things, even with things that look like sunshines and rainbows, and especially to maybe the audience or people on the outside that don't get to see like what it's like within the group, and sometimes like how that is, it's not always like that. It's not always perfect. There's a lot of times that I've come on this podcast before mad at God. Not sometimes not even like very, very much so questioning his belief, right? And I'm sitting there asking and telling people about him, like, you know what, like, that's crazy. But that's the most beautiful thing about this podcast is, I said it on Momentum's podcast, God uses us, the broken people, the broken high schoolers, that honestly just want to talk about him or just talk about life in general, and then it ends up talking about him because he's such a crucial part to us.
I think that's such an important thing to say, because I feel like with the media now, everyone's trying to like glorify their faith journey
Yeah.
and saying everything is perfect with God in their lives. And it is, obviously, but it's hard. And you have to acknowledge that it's going to be hard and that everything isn't sunshine and rainbows.
Yeah.
And so, going back to vulnerability, but, but I think it's just such an important thing. And over this past year, I think that's one of the main things that's been shown through this podcast is that it shows how far vulnerability can take you, especially with God by your side. And another thing I'm seeing throughout all the reminiscing is that we wouldn't be as far as we would be if we didn't have Christ-like people in our lives with us, and like surrounding ourselves with people who that want a better relationship with God and want to push you for a better relationship with God.
Yeah.
And I think that's just like kind of a really cool reality check, wrong term, but for like seeing who I was surrounding myself with and how I can go out and help other people now.
Yeah.
Because I started at a place where I didn't believe in God. And then now I'm at a place where I want to go out and help people believe in God. Just like
Ooh. That's good.
That's
kind
good.
of
And what was the in between there?
tears, discerning.
It was him seeking you out. It was you saying yes to him seeking you out. Like there's a version of me that was before, and there's a version of me now. And I think this is kind of what you're saying. There's a version of me before, and there's a version of me now, and the thing between was that changed it or made that change happen was Christ. And I think that's a very beautiful concept because it's unlike nothing like anything else in our life. Like I can look at Braden, I can look at Noah, I can look at everyone in this room and say, I have seen us grow in a way that's not normal. That is unlike this world. We have grown against the grain. You know what I mean? Like, and that's funny because I was just watching David Ladding went on a podcast with and the name of the podcast was Against the Grain. Sorry, but
Okay.
Side tangent. But I think that's a beautiful gift to realize, and the community that's been built through the podcast and all the connections and friends and deep relationships and conversations have changed me. That's why we pray before and be like, change us first before you change anyone else out there. And just I gotta bring it up. When freaking Janna Kir came on the podcast and she just showed up to I text her and I'm like, hey, would you like to come on this podcast? She's like, yeah, I'd love to. And I sent her my address and she shows up, and I've never met this girl in my life. And then she comes down and spits just fire for an absolute hour of just amazing things she had to say. And Noah's sitting there with his jaw open the whole time.
Bro, I was blown away. Like, it was like having a celebrity on. Because I saw her speak at the Eucharistic Revival, and I DM'd her on Instagram or whatever, and then 5 months later somehow she's sitting in where Jacob was. To me, that was just crazy,
Bizarre.
Yeah.
I think another thing to you're talking about the growth and how we changed throughout it all. The pattern of growth of the podcast itself was also really interesting, and I think helped us learn a lot.
Yeah.
Because, I remember those days of school where we were showing up and the followers are just climbing by the thousands, and we're all
my gosh, I forgot about
everybody's.
that was crazy.
In that moment, it was all sunshines and rainbows, peaches and plums, as some might say. But then, as we kind of got to this point where the numbers stopped going up, in fact, maybe even down a little bit.
We went down 1,000 followers.
But we're that's not what matters. We're still reaching people.
Yeah.
We're still reaching one person.
Yes.
Those reflections to realize what the intentions, why the people who started it did what they were.
Mm-hmm.
Those people are also the same people who are, it's just us. But
Those people are.
those people. Yeah, I said that in a really weird way, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Like the person who had that same intention to start it did it for the one person who might hear it. And the way we've kind of full circled and realized that even though, whatever it is, 16, 17,000 followers later,
Yeah,
still got to do it for that one person.
for sure.
Yeah, speaking of like followers, I remember in the very beginning, like that first month, I told the guys like Nick, Braden, and Ashton, I was like, fellas, if we hit 1,500 followers by some miracle, I'm gonna bleach my hair. And then I said at 2,000 followers, I'm gonna buzz my hair. And I just remember then like there was this one point where we were at like 350 followers to then like 6,000. And I was like, holy cow. And I was all set and ready to do it. And my parents got mad at me because they thought that I like promoted it in order to get followers. So they were very upset with me with that. But I cleared things up. It's just funny because I remember we thought like, no, we're never going to reach like over 1,000 followers. Like that'd be crazy.
Our goal was for in a year to I think to hit like 1,000 followers or something.
The goal was by the end of the year, like, because we started at 2023.
Yeah.
I remember I said the goal should be to hit 350 followers by the end of the year, and you guys all said that was impossible.
But kind of going into the growth, because I can speak a little bit more on it because I kind of run the social media and make the posts and all that. So the phases have been really interesting, and what God has revealed through that has been so interesting because, like, for 3 months, after 3 months we hit like 500 followers, and then like Noah said, in a span of a week we hit 1,000 followers, and then 5 days after that we hit 10,000.
It just kept going.
That's like insane, right? And we're dealing with kids. Like I literally had to dedicate probably 30 minutes of my day every single day during that like month stretch of just replying to people through Instagram DMs, which was the greatest gift of my life. It was so cool. But now you fast forward to where we are now. We've lost 1,000 followers, and I am in such. I don't know about you guys, but I'm in such a happy place, especially because like usually I pick the clips and whatever. It's so much easier for me to post now because it's like we've built the community and we're just spreading the gospel. We're equipping them with the tools, and it's not a bunch of pressure of, okay, I have to pick this clip for it to reach this amount of people. No, it's not about that. It's like about that one person. And also the bigger thing I think that God has been revealing to me is like he promoted this for a time being, and is still using it. Don't want to say like, oh, he's not using it. And he's still using it, but also to open doors. The only I talked about it with my mom, like the only reason I got to speak at Momentum for a little bit and go on their podcast and stuff like that was because of that. Which is just and God had to make that happen, right? He knew that there was a certain kid that really needed me there, that I was blessed to have a conversation with and change the course of his life, right? And so God knew that. And thinking back and being like, so when we sat down for the first one outside of Noah's house, all sweaty after playing like 3 hours of different sports, thinking that God knew, like, okay, this is all gonna happen just for that kid, and just for that kid, and just for that kid, and is still opening these massive doors. There's something big brewing in the works that has only been opened by God through this. And so I'm really excited for that, which we'll eventually talk about when it's more formed. But yeah, I think that's been a big thing.
All right, so I'm gonna fire off a question here. I think this might be my first one since the first podcast.
For old time's sake.
It's kind of a double-ended question, socially and spiritually. So, what do you do when you feel lonely in a group, and just loneliness in general? And then, when you do pray to God about it, how do you hear him? Because that's something I've never heard, or, like, I feel like I've never, like, experienced that, and I don't know, like, what to do.
Anyone want to answer?
I think when you're starting to feel lonely in a group, or like lonely just surrounded by a lot of people, that's kind of your calling to go off by yourself and sit with God. Because it might be because you're looking for too much gratification through other people, through worldly things, for whatever you're there for. But like, I know myself, I've experienced that, and I've kept trying to surround myself with people because I just didn't want to be by myself. I always wanted to be with everyone else. But as soon as I was like, okay, fine, I'll go sit by myself. Like, it's fine. And then every time I go sit by myself, I would journal, Bible study, read certain prayers. And then I would just sit there and be like, Lord, where are you? Like, I'm doing everything you're telling me. I'm going away from the group. I'm being by myself. And it can get overwhelming, but you really just have to understand that God just wants to know you. And he can't know you if you're filling up your time with him through journaling and everything else, or sitting with other people all the time, or like, just, you need to always just like sit and take a moment, and don't try and force anything, because in the long run, it's God's plan, not your plan. And it'll add so much more stress if you try and control everything around you. And even if you like get frustrated, if you feel like God's not talking to you, at least just sit in silence for a second. Just give it a shot. I swear something will happen. And then start trying to see him more throughout your life. If you're worried about something, give it to God. If you're happy about how you're doing in your sport, do it for the glory of God. Do you know what I'm trying to say?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't know. It's just kind of not trying to force his word, instead of just listening for it.
I just want to bounce off that and say that I feel like there's a simple level of honor in solitude.
Yeah.
But the thing is that there's a difference between being alone and being lonely. And I think that it's a lot easier to be alone than it is to be lonely, because you can feel lonely and still be with other people. And that's like a difficult thing. Like, I remember in grade school, like I was still maturing into like the person I am now. And like everyone's all awkward, like when you're like 13 or whatever. But like in middle school, I just remember like a lot of like people would be like, oh man, that was a crazy sleepover. Like, yeah, that was great. Or I can't wait to go to the Cavs game later tonight and stuff like that. And I just remember thinking like, it's been so long since I've done any of that stuff. And like, even though I went to like school with these people for like 9 years or whatever, I just never really felt like I fit in as well as everyone else did. And if you want advice, I mean, the reality is like, I really don't know. Like, that's still something you're going to have to figure out the rest of your life. Sure. Like, it's not just instantly going to click one day. If it does, then that's great. But I think if you feel lonely, I would say bring it up with someone. Maybe that's a close friend, or maybe it's someone you think could be the cause of why you're being lonely. Because I guarantee you that no one wants you to feel lonely. Like since we've been at school, everyone always talks about, oh, include others. And I think a lot of times we do a pretty good job of that, but we're not always aware of it. Mm-hmm. So if you bring it up with someone you think might help and say, hey, I love you, you're a great friend of mine, but, I kind of feel like I'm being a little left out here. And I think the more honest you are with yourself and with that person or with that group of people, like, what can go wrong? Like, they're not going to, like, spit in your face and say, good, like, we want you to feel lonely. This is all planned. I think a lot of times, like people will try to help. And as sad as it is, like, I feel like there's no pill you can take that will make the loneliness go away or whatever. Like, you can't just drink something and then, like, boom, status effect, everyone's friends again. Like, that's not really how it works. But I would just say, be honest with your emotions and be honest with other people. Because a lot of times, like, it's hard to see if someone's feeling lonely, but if you bring that up with someone or with multiple people, then like now you guys have something to work for. I kind of like rambled a lot. I don't know if that answers any question.
So the best way for me, like kind of how Noah started, is like the best advice that I can only give advice off of something that I've dealt with. Like that's the best advice that I can give you. And so everyone tells you that senior year is gonna be the best year, like of high school, right? And I remember telling these guys at lunch, like what, for like a month into the school year, I was like, this has been my least favorite year.
I can literally picture you saying, I remember that moment very vividly.
I think though, like that first month, I was like also in the hospital, so I don't think.
Yeah, you weren't there as much,
lost a good friend.
But yeah, I was feeling that. I was really feeling that. I just felt like I felt like I had all these friends, but not like nothing. The relationship deepness, I was missing that. You know, these guys were busy with soccer all the time. You know, I was busy with golf and all these different things, and I didn't have the time to do this. To be honest, we didn't have the time to sit down and do this. And there was just all these different factors at play, and I just remember like talking to them about it and just telling them at lunch, most random place of all time, but just being like, yeah, I hate this year. I'm like, I just can't wait to graduate right now. You know what I mean? Which is so sad. And, but then as soon as I talked to them about it, I could feel an instant change. I think it was a week or two after that, you know, we had our desert day together, and we and then we all learned that we're all kind of struggling a little bit. What I'm trying to say is other people deal with it. Opening up about it is going to have other people open up about it. And when broken people, like if you got two lonely people together, they're not going to be so lonely anymore because they can relate over that, and they're going to want to be there for each other. And, but the other thing that I want to say is, like the second question of like, how can I hear God's voice? What an amazing question. And everyone in like, what I wanted to open with is, Braden, whenever you ask questions, just like the first podcast, every time you start to ask a question, I get so nervous because I'm like, oh, I have no clue how to answer it. But you know what I mean? Like that. Yeah, like I was like, oh,
almost like bamboozling.
Yeah, I'm question. Like, gosh dang it. You know, this dude
make us look like idiots or something like that.
Yeah, like this dude again asking me the hardest question. But like, but that's the beauty of it, is asking questions, of asking your friends, being like, hey, I'm kind of struggling with this, help me here. Like, what do you think here? But the whole hearing God's voice thing, I feel like I've gotten better at it recently, in removing doubt. Of like, for example, when I go on my prayer walks now, I just go into it with the expectation, like I'm going to talk to God, like He's going to talk to me. When I open up and I say, Lord, talk to me through the Holy Spirit, I just know it's going to happen. And through that, when that happens, when I get the message of choose sin no longer, but rather my love forever, just put in my brain randomly, there's no doubt in my mind that that's God. Because I went in with it with intention. I know the power of God. I know Scripture well enough to know what is God and what is me. And I think that's the biggest thing, is just like kind of go into stuff more with expectation, not be like, hey God, speak to me right now, and then be wondering like, is He actually really speaking to me right now? You know what I'm saying? But yeah, something.
It was just like something you were talking earlier, and my mind started racing. I feel like there's a difference between hearing God and then listening to God, because like to listen to God, it's almost like you understand it, you sort of understand like what's going on. It's like a deep sense of awareness, because like, have you guys ever had this moment where like maybe you're on your phone, you're playing a video game, you're working on homework, someone's talking to you, and you hear them, but you don't listen to them?
Yeah.
I feel like God is the same way. You know, maybe we're distracted by a lot of things and we think we hear God, or maybe we're like, we don't even know if we hear God, but we're like, yeah, I'm sure He's saying something. But then to listen to God and to like discern what He's saying, like in the Bible, Samuel says, speak, Lord, your servant is listening. Emphasis on like the listening, you know? He didn't say like, speak, God, you know, I hear you, but like, I'm not really going to listen or whatever. Like, no, that was like a powerful moment of discernment. And so, like we've talked about this before, like when you pray, you don't always have to talk, but you also listen. It's like taking that to the next level. I think that's when you can listen to God, and it's a difficult thing to do.
Yeah.
But I think if you could like figure out how to do that, then like it's definitely gonna help.
I just want to interject to note that in 1 year I was just thinking about, as you've been talking, so many amazing metaphors and analogies.
Can we make a compilation?
When I was listening to the one with Luke,
Oh yeah.
I was cracking up along with him because it's just like metaphor after metaphor after metaphor. But it's the best. It's so funny. They're always great too.
Yeah.
But I just been thinking about it. I had a note for the 1 year because we've seen a lot of absolutely
Heard some good ones.
legendary
We've heard some bad ones.
Holy Spirit one. Yeah. There's one that
I think we had to edit one of them from the first podcast out
Yeah.
because it's just.
I'll never forget Noah on the Luke episode just grabbing a pillow and a bottle cap, and I'm like, what is this kid doing?
I don't even remember that.
I thought it's an Instagram.
Oh
it's
yeah,
a real
that was the
house.
one you reposted.
Yeah.
Yeah, at surface, like at the surface, it looks like
It was really
so
good though.
stupid.
It was
but,
good though.
Yeah.
Yeah, the question that I want to present, kind of going along, wait, one more thing for the whole lonely thing, for you to be able to operate in your friendships and your relationships in your life, you have to be working from a place of abundance. If you are not okay yourself, then you're not going to be okay socially. And like, that's the thing, is a lot of people, when they are feeling not okay with themselves, they just want to surround themselves with a bunch of other people, because then they're going to feel like they can kind of run away from it. But it's just filling the void deeper and deeper. How do I know that? Because I did that for a long time. But now I think I've begun to understand more that the times that I'm the best with others and most happy with others and don't feel as lonely is when I'm taking so much time, not for myself, but time with God, of just one-on-one time with him, so he can tell me who I am, so that when I go out into those social environments, I'm confident in who I am, so I can be myself around those people.
Just want to point out too, with like groups, sometimes you're with a group of people who aren't the best, and there's a guy I know, super wise man. Really love what he has to say, and he would say this prayer where he'd say like, God, take out the bad people in my life and put in good people and stuff like that. And I feel like you can never really go wrong with that prayer. So
Yeah, that's a great. I think that's a great prayer too. Yeah.
awesome.
Who's the wise man?
I don't know. He's a good dude though.
No, yeah, that's the best prayer. Like that prayer. Every time I pray that prayer, like within 2 weeks, bang bang. Like it's actually like crazy. The question I was going to present to everyone, I think actually Libby and I had a conversation about the other night. How do you deal with doubt? Especially like doubt. And you can take it in whatever direction or context you want. But how do you deal with doubt?
Okay. Well, here's the context that I've been led to believe. Doubt is a good thing. It doesn't sound like that, but doubt is actually a good thing, because a lot of times when people doubt, they have questions similar to Braden, right? And we've been saying this for probably 365 days now, is that when you ask questions, it leads to answers. And I admire the people who doubt, because it's not disbelief. It's not atheism. It's like a questioning. And I don't think you really grow much if you don't question what's around you. 100%. And like our whole lives, we've been questioning things, you know, like, why do I go to school? Why do mom and dad want me to do this? Why does God love me? All these things. And yet if you really doubt them, it doesn't mean you disbelieve it. It just means you're questioning it. You question it, and then it might take a while, but you find your answer. And doubt is prevalent in the Bible too. In the New Testament, specifically, Thomas, one of the 12, he's known as Doubting Thomas. Why? Because he doubted. He doubted Jesus, and then when after Jesus rose from the dead, and the disciples, the apostles, they're like, dude, Thomas, like we saw Jesus. Like, how crazy is that? He's like, no, I don't know about that. Like, but then he, I kind of forget what happens, but he ends up understanding that Jesus did rise from the dead, and he did appear to them. And you know what happens is he spends his life professing the word of God, and that's what happens when you doubt.
I think you make a good point about the asking questions sort of thing, because to go with a little metaphor analogy, actually.
Oh, please do.
Like if you're say we're sitting in calc class, and we're just sitting calculus.
Oh, okay.
That was slang, but say we're sitting there, Miss Sanders going on, and you're lost, but instead of asking the question, you just let it get further and further and further.
Come on.
And you're
I
like,
see where you're getting that.
You're like, okay, let's back it up. I don't even know what a limit is. And you just, if you let it get to that point where, you know, you're not asking questions and things are going further and further and further, then you're missing out on so much information that you could be building up to get to that highest point.
Yeah.
I feel like when you stop questioning, you're just putting yourself in a box of kind of your own understanding, when really it's not like supposed to be your understanding almost, because I feel like it's so prevalent in the Bible that it's like God is beyond our understanding. And when you stop and are like, oh, I know everything.
Yeah.
Like, I've read the entire Bible, like, I know everything. That's kind of, that there's no growth there. And I just lost my train of thought.
You're good.
I was just thinking about the Bible. Okay, yeah, that's all I just.
Speaking of the Bible, Philippians 4:6, do not be anxious about anything, but in every situation, by prayer and petition, through thanksgiving, let your requests be made known to God. So it's like, let all of your let God know everything. Like, if you have a doubt, a worry, anxiety, just let God know. Thank him, just let everything, just give it all up to him.
Dang, bro, you really have that verse memorized.
Yeah.
By the back of your wrist.
Yeah.
Knows it like the back of his wrist.
The way Noah, I want to do a slow-mo like reverb on Noah's. He goes, whoa.
It was good.
You said one thing.
Yeah, I wanted to circle back to something Libby said. She said and like the last year, things have been difficult. Things have gone really well. Like when we went on Kairos, some of us went to Tole Lege, some of us went to Momentum. Some of us became life leaders and gave witnesses. But that doesn't mean we didn't have our own struggles, our own doubts, our own questions. Sometimes first time in my life, I wrestled with the idea of atheism over the summer. I didn't want to. It just kind of happened. And the worst part is that there's going to be worse spiritual warfare. Life doesn't really get any easier, and because we're working on college applications, it's been a stressful time, right? And yet life is going to get a lot harder. And Libby kind of talked about that, how a lot of people glorify that, oh, when I'm with God, everything is perfect and blah, 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 blah. And while you might feel some sense of fulfillment, life itself doesn't really get any easier. There's no switch, this good luck switch that turns on. Life is hard. There's some days it's just hard to keep going. But it's you against the world, and you probably won't win. But if you ally yourself with God, then that at least gives you some hope. And if you look at the apostles, we've mentioned this before, how the story doesn't go, and then the 12 proclaimed the word of God, and they all lived happily ever after, and their descendants are still around today telling the story, and look, here they are. No, that didn't happen. The reality is that crucified upside down. 11 out of the 12 were martyred. The only one who wasn't was St. John, and he was even exiled, and then he wrote the book of Revelation. So if you take a look at the people who were closest to Jesus, they witnessed him for 3 years, and they gave their lives. It wasn't easy. You know, I don't think any person on earth can say, oh yeah, it looks easy being crucified under upside down. And that's what happened when they allied themselves with God, right? So in some senses, life might even get harder for some people. Maybe you'll lose friendships because your lifestyles conflict now. You know, maybe you'll lose relationships. But at the end of the day, if you do ally yourself with God, no, life won't be perfect. But you know what is? Heaven. If you have faith in Jesus, then I think that's the most perfect thing there is out there.
Yeah. Kind of just talking to the like I'll say this: first 3-4 months of the podcast were probably the craziest and best months of my life.
I agree.
Like when I look back on it, I'm like, those were just, it was just such a high. There's nothing that could get me down. You could just see, literally see the Lord working. There's just so many conversations being had, new friendships, all these different things, and it was so revealing. But the thing that I have to remind myself of now, especially after those 3 to 4 months of just happiness ended, and kind of enter back into a trial, or this not so happy, great feeling. Not saying there have been great moments. Probably the greatest moment of my life happened in the midst of the worst week of my life, or not worst week of my life, but close to it. And what I'm trying to say is, you have to suffer for good to happen. The devil knows what God has in store for you. He knows how God is going to use you. And anytime something big is about to happen, especially in my life, I see it every time. I'm seeing it right now as Kairos is coming up and we're looking to lead that. Like, I told Noah about this. Like, to be fully vulnerable with you guys, Mike, it's been 8 days in a row that I've cried because just I've been getting attacked spiritually. And for a while, I thought it was different things in my life. But I just realized, no, I'm just getting attacked because something big is about to happen. Because God is working. And the devil's trying to tell me it's this or that or this thing or that thing. And then I look at it and I take it out on a certain person, or, you know, like my poor girlfriend, like I took it out on her the one night, and I was just like, and I had to apologize. I'm like, it is not your fault. The devil's trying to tell me like this, that, whatever, but like really I'm just going to attack spiritually right now. And so what I'm trying to tell you is, anytime you are suffering immensely, look back and see, okay, who is doing this to me? Like, am I doing this to myself? Is the devil attacking me? Like, what is going on here? And that might be the moment that you're on the precipice. Is that the word? Precipice of something really good. I think that's the word. But and so the same way before the podcast, I couldn't have done the podcast with these guys if I didn't become really good friends with Noah leading up to it, if I didn't become really good friends with Ashton leading up to it, you know, with being the same mentor group as Braden in different classes and being buddies and haps and all that, like all that would have never happened if the podcast would have never happened without those. And there was hard seasons in there. Like, I suffered a lot leading up to the podcast, like, you know, and I could go through and tell you about all those, but what I'm trying to say is, don't be discouraged when you're going through a hard season, because usually that 3 to 4 months is going to come, or even just that moment. And that makes it so much worth it, because if I'm serving God, then I don't care. I don't care how I feel, because I'm serving God. Like that, what better gift could you get?
I think truly having faith is trusting God even in the hardest times, and just staying with him, because you know that his plan is so much better than what you're feeling in the moment.
Yeah.
Because if you're consistently feeling bad, and you're in a season of, I would say, loneliness or sadness, and you keep telling yourself that it's God's plan and it's for the better, it's not for nothing. Like, this is happening to you, it's leading up to something. This isn't just happening because God wants to torture you. Yeah. No, he doesn't want to do that to you. God loves you unconditionally.
Yeah.
And I think that even though it can be a hard test of your faith, it's leading to something even bigger than we've ever imagined. So I think.
I also think too, like with that topic of like going through hard times and stuff like that, a difficult time is so much harder if you're like rooted in sin. Like if you make bad decisions already, well, in a time of suffering, you're gonna make worse decisions. And so I feel like if you're going through a hard time, bad habits lead to worse outcomes, but good habits lead to greater outcomes. And so if like you're going through spiritual warfare, and if you have like bad habits, like maybe you talk rudely to your mom, or maybe you say like unkind things to people or think unkind things, I feel like that's only going to get magnified in a situation where you're struggling, right? But I feel like if you do good things on a regular basis, I think it takes like 55 days for something to become a habit. If you're doing good habits, then at least if you're going through a hard time, you have those good habits to keep you company, and you have those to, work towards something greater.
And going off of that, if you keep doing things that are godly, right? So like reading your Bible or praying, those are usually your times where you're happier, actually. Even though at first it might seem like a chore or something that you have to do, and it's like a box to check off your list. It shouldn't be like that. It should be something that you want to do and enjoy. And when you do, that's when you feel happier. And not only spiritually, but also just, I guess, mentally and stuff like that.
Yeah. I think sometimes like, I hate to say this because I hate like the check in the box thing, but sometimes it starts like that.
Yeah.
Like totally like it. When we would wake up and go do morning prayer, I hated it. Like not that I like.
No. You talked not very.
But like it wasn't our favorite thing. Like you know what I mean? Like I was like, oh, I'm never.
Felt like a cold. Remember we talked.
Oh
about
yeah,
that?
I was like, I would never do this outside of this like retreat or whatever. But then next thing you know, I'm coming home and I'm doing the night prayer by myself, and I'm like, okay, so that's why we were doing that.
I genuinely think that was the most surprising thing about you I've ever heard. Like I can't think of a single other time that tops that.
Yeah, I did not talk very positively about. Yeah,
but like sometimes those things that we like to test, like growing up or even now, sometimes people are like, oh, I hate going to church. I hate going to my youth group or whatever. Hate praying with my family before dinner. Like I just want to go eat in front of the TV or eat in my room or whatever. Yeah. But you know what? Like those are gonna end up being fond memories we have, and we learn stuff from that. Like those good habits lead to greater outcomes.
Yeah. Just see it through. You gotta see it through sometimes. And that's hard to say to someone that's going through a hard season. Like that's not what I want to hear.
Right.
You know what I mean?
It's difficult to hear.
But it does get better. Like, again, I'll get vulnerable again. Like, I went through a really hard season for like a long time, or a decent amount of time, a few months, which is a long time, it feels like to me, to go through a hard season. But then I had like probably a month that was like really, really good. And now I'm here again, and I'm like, I'm suffering, like in spiritual warfare, all that stuff. But this time it's different because I'm embracing it for the glory of God. I'm not complaining to him about it. I'm not, throwing up my fists and being like, why would you do this to me? But more so doing, I'll take this on for the gospel. I will die for the gospel. I'll die for the creator of the universe. I had to get that in there, for old time's sake. But yeah, like, I genuinely mean that, of like, if you're in the season right now where you are suffering and you're like, I can't stand this anymore, I can't do this anymore, maybe change your mindset from I can't do this anymore to I'm gonna use this. I'm gonna glorify God with this. I'm gonna take this. Like, my favorite clip from the Dave Lanning podcast that I sent to him, and I think I sent to you and you. I think I sent it to everyone. Is he goes, he's like, when I had the biggest miracle of my life happen was after 5 months of just intense spiritual warfare, and I felt like a crazy man when I was in the woods on my knees going, Lord, I will suffer for the rest of my life and not hear you for the rest of my life and still glorify you every single day. It's that mentality that leads to the breakthrough. It might not lead to a miracle in the moment or a breakthrough in the moment, but it'll lead to it eventually because you are glorifying God, and what can go wrong when you're trying to glorify him? Mic drop. Done. So does anyone have any final questions, maybe anything like that?
What's gonna happen within the next year, guys? Like, a year from now, we'll be in college. Like, what are we hoping? What are we hoping for? Like, faith wise, we're gonna get stronger. We're
I'm
gonna.
hoping so. I mean, I actually have a call today with a campus ministry, the campus ministry leader at one of those schools I'm looking at. So.
That'd be
Well, there we go.
Nice. You didn't tell us about that. Live reaction. That's cool. So, yeah. Yeah, actually, no, I'm planning on, like, my faith, like, falling off. Like,
Well, we didn't plan on it. You know what happened?
Yeah, I know.
We did.
no.
But we're back.
No, I think it'll continue. I think this will continue. We will figure out a way to do it online. But you know what? To be honest, I don't know. It's just wherever God takes us.
I have an idea. What if next year we get sponsored by OSU?
Oh,
Could you
man.
imagine how crazy that would be?
OSU football team.
Yeah, the OSU football. They get Will Howard on. But yeah, I don't know. Another thing for everyone, especially if you're looking to do something like this, people ask me that we get a lot of DMs like, hey, thinking of starting my own podcast. What's your biggest piece of advice? Be obedient to God. Like, don't care about. To be honest, there's a lot of people in the world. I don't really care what you think. Like, I hate to say that, I do, but like, I care what God thinks. And if you're being obedient to what God wants you to say and what He wants you to do with this, then I actually will care, because He is set apart. He is different from everyone else. And I think that's God has blessed us with that mentality of, like, we're just gathering to do His work, and just glorify Him. So it's not about what we want, it's about what He wants. So same thing with the future of this podcast. So
And then if there's anybody out there who kind of where I was about a year ago, atheist or skeptical, go out there and seek Him yourself, right? You can ask other people for help and whatnot, but go out there and find out for yourself, because that's where you're going to find the best outcome, so to speak. You're going to find the most improvement and the most growth when you're in there by yourself, trying to figure something out, because that's when you get in those rabbit holes, those deep, sitting at your computer for hours, just like, oh wait, this is interesting. And then people will help you along your way, but seek Him yourself.
yes. And we're here for you. DM us. I love when people DM us. I always send it to the boys. It's always a lot. It's always really cool.
Yeah.
So please ask questions to us. We love it. Might not always have the best answer, but we try our hardest. We just trust God that He'll answer it. So
Thank you guys for your support the last year.
yeah,
It's been great.
it's been pretty cool.
Really would not have expected that.
No, not at all.
Very glad it happened.
Yeah, and thank you, Libby, for being a part.
Yeah,
of it.
thank you, Libby.
Thank
And if
you,
Jacob
guys.
was still here.
Oh yeah.
You don't see it?
Yeah.
No, I do not see
It's
him. I
right
see him
there.
in the chair.
Tripping.
Yeah, I'm gonna crop his photo from the picture we just fucking put it in there. He's gonna be sitting there like this the whole time.
Giving thumbs up.
Okay, guys. All right. Livy, give us a final clap. You got a clap.